The conference room fell silent as my boss Sarah looked directly at me and said those words that would change everything. "Marcus, I'm sorry, but we've decided you're not leadership material. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." 23 pairs of eyes stared at me in that sterile corporate meeting room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across everyone's shocked faces. What Sarah didn't know was that I had already signed a contract with her biggest competitor just 3 days earlier. The rain was pounding against the windows of our downtown Chicago office building that Tuesday morning when everything started to unravel. I had been working at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for 4 years, climbing from junior account executive to senior project manager. The city looked gray and unforgiving through the glass, matching the tension that had been building in our department for weeks. The November storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos that was about to unfold in my professional life, though I had no way of knowing just how dramatically things were about to change. Before we continue with this incredible story, I want to let you know about something amazing happening right now. We're giving away a brand new motorcycle to celebrate reaching our subscriber milestone. All you have to do is subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. The winner will be announced next month, so don't miss your chance to ride away with an incredible prize. My journey at Pinnacle started 4 years ago when I was fresh out of Northwestern University with my MBA in strategic marketing. I was hungry, determined, and ready to prove myself in the competitive world of corporate marketing. The company was known throughout Chicago for its aggressive culture and high-pressure environment, but I thrived in that atmosphere. My personality had always been suited to challenging situations where results mattered more than politics. The company occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of Lake Michigan and the bustling streets below. During my first year, I exceeded every sales target they gave me by an average of 28%. My approach was different from most of my colleagues who relied heavily on established relationships and traditional sales techniques. Instead, I spent countless hours researching potential clients, understanding their industry challenges, and developing customized solutions that addressed their specific needs. While other account executives were making cold calls and sending generic proposals, I was creating detailed market analyses and innovative campaign concepts that demonstrated real value. By year 2, I was handling major accounts that other senior managers struggled with, including several Fortune 500 companies that had previously been considered difficult to work with. The clients loved my approach because I actually listened to their needs instead of just pushing our standard service packages. I remember one particularly challenging client, a pharmaceutical company that had burned through 3 different marketing agencies in 2 years. Their marketing director, a tough former military officer named Patricia Coleman, initially seemed skeptical of working with someone so young. But after I presented a comprehensive strategy that addressed their regulatory compliance concerns while maximizing their digital reach, she became one of my strongest advocates. My success with Patricia's company led to referrals within the pharmaceutical industry, and within 18 months, I had built what colleagues referred to as the Pharma Pipeline, a network of interconnected clients that generated nearly $2 million in annual revenue for Pinnacle. The pharmaceutical industry is notoriously conservative and relationship-driven, so building trust and credibility required a completely different approach than our typical technology or retail clients. Sarah Mitchell had been my direct supervisor for the past 18 months, having been promoted to department head after her predecessor left for a position at a competitor in New York. She was in her early 40s, sharp as a razor, and known throughout the industry for her ruthless tactics and ability to close difficult deals. Sarah had built her reputation over 15 years by taking credit for her team's successes while deflecting blame for failures onto individual contributors. Most of my colleagues walked on eggshells around her, carefully managing every interaction to avoid triggering her unpredictable temper. Despite her reputation, I had always maintained what I thought was a professional relationship based on results. My quarterly reviews were consistently outstanding, with ratings of exceeds expectations in every category including client satisfaction, revenue generation, and team collaboration. My client retention rate was the highest in the department at 94%, compared to the department average of 78%. I had also mentored 3 junior executives, 2 of whom had been promoted to senior account manager positions within their first 2 years. The problem started 3 months earlier when our company lost the Morrison Industries account, a $1 million client that represented nearly 15% of our annual revenue. Morrison had been with Pinnacle for over 6 years, but their new CEO, a dynamic woman named Elena Rodriguez who had previously turned around 2 struggling manufacturing companies, decided to shake things up across all their vendor relationships. Elena had a reputation for making quick, decisive changes that often caught established service providers off guard. The official reason Morrison gave for terminating their contract was that they wanted to explore fresh perspectives and innovative approaches from agencies that could better understand their expanding international markets. What hurt most was that they specifically mentioned feeling like their current agency had become complacent and wasn't bringing the creative energy they needed for their aggressive growth plans in Southeast Asia and Latin America. Elena had specifically stated in her termination call that she needed an agency that could think like a startup while delivering enterprise-level results. The loss of Morrison Industries sent shockwaves through our entire organization. It wasn't just the immediate financial impact, though losing 15% of departmental revenue was certainly significant. The real concern was what Morrison's departure said about our ability to evolve with changing client needs and maintain relationships with forward-thinking companies. Several other clients began asking pointed questions about our innovation strategies and long-term vision for digital transformation. Sarah called an emergency meeting the day after we lost Morrison, scheduling it for 7:30 in the morning to ensure everyone could attend before their regular client obligations began. The conference room was packed with our entire 30-person team, from junior executives who had been with the company less than 6 months to senior partners who had helped build Pinnacle's reputation over the past decade. The atmosphere was tense, with people speaking in hushed tones and exchanging worried glances. Sarah stood at the front of the room, positioned in front of the large wall-mounted screen that usually displayed client presentation materials. Her usually perfect composure showed cracks around the edges, and I noticed she was gripping her coffee cup more tightly than usual. Her voice was steady when she began speaking, but I could see the stress lines around her eyes and the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was feeling significant pressure from the executive level. "This is a wake-up call for everyone in this room," she began, her gaze sweeping across the assembled team with the kind of intensity that made people unconsciously straighten in their chairs. Morrison Industries didn't just leave us for better pricing or more convenient service delivery. They left because we failed to innovate, failed to anticipate their evolving needs, and failed to demonstrate the kind of forward-thinking leadership they expect from a premier marketing firm. She spent the next 20 minutes dissecting what had gone wrong with the Morrison account, analyzing every client interaction and campaign decision from the previous year. According to Sarah's post-mortem analysis, there had been warning signs that the relationship was deteriorating, including decreased engagement in our monthly strategy meetings and lukewarm responses to our most recent campaign proposals. She suggested that someone should have recognized these red flags and taken proactive steps to address Morrison's concerns before they reached the point of terminating the relationship entirely. That's when she started talking about leadership gaps in our organization, a topic that would prove to be more personally relevant than I realized at the time. According to Sarah, too many people in our department were comfortable in their roles without pushing boundaries or challenging conventional thinking. She wanted to see who had the vision and drive to help rebuild our reputation and win back the confidence of clients like Morrison Industries. The message was clear: step up or step out. Real leaders don't wait for permission to innovate, she continued, her voice growing more passionate as she warmed to her theme. They don't hide behind established processes when those processes are clearly not delivering the results our clients expect. They take initiative, they think strategically, and they're willing to take calculated risks to achieve breakthrough results. I took her words as a personal challenge and an opportunity to demonstrate exactly the kind of leadership she was describing. Over the next 2 months, I worked longer hours than ever before, often staying until 9 or 10 o'clock to develop innovative campaign concepts and research potential new client opportunities. My apartment in Lincoln Park became a secondary office, with marketing research materials spread across my dining room table and industry publications stacked on every available surface. I created detailed proposals for 3 major prospects in industries where Pinnacle had limited experience, including a renewable energy company, a fintech startup, and a luxury automotive dealership network. Each proposal required extensive industry research and the development of specialized marketing strategies that leveraged our core competencies while addressing sector-specific challenges. The renewable energy proposal alone required 40 hours of research into government regulations, industry trends, and competitive landscape analysis. My efforts paid off when I managed to secure preliminary meetings with all three prospects. The renewable energy company, SolarTech Innovations, was particularly impressed with my understanding of their regulatory environment and the creative ways I had proposed to communicate complex technical concepts to residential consumers. Their marketing director, James Park, told me it was the most comprehensive and thoughtful proposal his company had received from any agency. My existing clients were so impressed with my renewed energy and creative approaches that two of them increased their contracted services without any prompting from me. Patricia Coleman at the pharmaceutical company expanded our relationship to include social media management and crisis communications planning, adding $300,000 to our annual contract value. Another longtime client, a regional restaurant chain, asked me to develop a completely new brand identity campaign after seeing some preliminary concepts I had created during my innovation push. But rather than being pleased with these results, Sarah seemed increasingly distant and critical of my work. During our weekly one-on-one meetings, which had previously been collaborative strategy sessions, she would pick apart minor details in my presentations and question decisions that had previously earned praise from both clients and senior management. Her feedback became increasingly nitpicky, focusing on formatting inconsistencies in my reports or questioning why I had chosen one particular research methodology over another. When I brought in SolarTech Innovations as a new client worth $400,000 annually, Sarah spent our next meeting discussing ways I could have negotiated better terms instead of celebrating the successful acquisition of a client in a completely new industry vertical. She suggested that my initial pricing had been too conservative and that I should have pushed for a larger retainer commitment up front. Her criticism felt particularly unfair given that SolarTech had been hesitant to work with an agency that lacked renewable energy experience. When I successfully prevented another longtime client from jumping ship to a competitor by developing an emergency retention campaign over a single weekend, Sarah suggested that the situation never should have reached that point in the first place. She implied that a more attentive account manager would have identified the client's concerns earlier and addressed them before they became serious enough to threaten the relationship. Her response completely ignored the fact that the client's dissatisfaction had stemmed from internal changes at their company that were completely beyond our control. The turning point came during our quarterly strategy session in late October. Chicago was experiencing an unusually warm fall, with temperatures reaching nearly 70 degrees and bright sunshine streaming through the office windows as we gathered to discuss our plans for the upcoming year. The warm weather felt almost surreal given that we were just weeks away from the harsh Midwestern winter that would soon engulf the city in snow and freezing temperatures. Sarah had asked everyone to prepare comprehensive presentations outlining their vision for growing our client base and strengthening our market position in the coming year. She emphasized that she wanted to see innovative thinking and strategic approaches that would differentiate Pinnacle from our increasingly aggressive competition. The presentations were scheduled to last the entire day, with each team member allocated 30 minutes to present their ideas and respond to questions from colleagues and senior management. I had spent 3 weeks preparing my presentation, working evenings and weekends to research emerging trends in digital marketing, and developing a comprehensive strategy for targeting mid-sized technology companies. This demographic represented a significant growth opportunity because technology firms typically had larger marketing budgets than traditional businesses, but were often underserved by agencies that focused primarily on either small startups or large enterprise clients. The demographic analysis alone had taken me 40 hours to complete, involving detailed research into company sizes, growth trajectories, typical marketing spend patterns, and decision-making processes within technology organizations. I had identified over 200 companies in the Chicago metropolitan area that fit our ideal client profile, along with contact information for key decision-makers and preliminary assessments of their current marketing approaches. I had also created detailed mock-ups of campaign materials that showcased how we could differentiate ourselves from competitors by offering specialized services tailored to the unique needs of technology companies. These included technical content marketing, developer community engagement strategies, and integrated campaigns that could effectively communicate complex product benefits to both technical and business audiences. When my turn came to present, I could feel the energy in the room shift in a positive direction. My colleagues were engaged from the very first slide, asking thoughtful questions and building on my ideas with suggestions of their own. Several people commented that my approach could revolutionize how we handled client acquisition and positioned ourselves in the competitive landscape. Even some of the senior partners seemed genuinely impressed by the research depth and creative solutions I had developed. Jennifer Walsh, who had been with the company for 7 years and was known for her analytical approach to marketing strategy, called my presentation the most comprehensive market analysis she had seen in years. Michael Chun, one of the senior partners, specifically praised my innovative approach to content marketing for technical audiences, noting that it addressed a significant gap in our current service offerings. The technology sector focus wasn't just theoretical. I had already begun implementing some of these strategies with existing clients who had technology components to their businesses. The results had been impressive, with engagement rates that were consistently 20 to 30% higher than our traditional approaches. One client had specifically mentioned that our new technical content approach had helped them reach decision-makers they had been trying to connect with for years. Sarah listened to the entire presentation without expression, occasionally taking notes in a leather-bound notebook but never engaging with the content or asking any questions. Her body language was closed off, with her arms crossed and her expression neutral to the point of seeming disinterested. When I finished and opened the floor for questions, she simply said, "Thank you, Marcus. We'll take that under consideration," without offering any feedback or acknowledgement of the positive responses from other team members. The room felt awkward as people expected her to offer some commentary or recognition, especially given the enthusiastic reception from everyone else. Instead, she just moved on to the next presenter without any transition or summary of key points. I felt embarrassed and confused, uncertain whether I had somehow misread the room or if there was something about my presentation that had particularly bothered her. After the meeting, Jennifer pulled me aside in the hallway outside the conference room. Her expression was concerned, and she kept glancing around to make sure we weren't being overheard by other colleagues or, more importantly, by Sarah herself. Jennifer had developed a reputation for being politically astute and having a good read on office dynamics, so her concern immediately put me on alert. "That was an incredible presentation," she said, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "I've been in a lot of strategy meetings over the years, and that was easily one of the most thorough and innovative proposals I've ever seen. But I think you should be careful about how you proceed from here." When I asked what she meant, Jennifer's expression grew even more serious. "Sarah looked like she was ready to explode when everyone was praising your ideas and asking follow-up questions. You know how she gets when she feels like someone is getting attention that should be directed toward her. She's always positioned herself as the strategic visionary for our department, and your presentation basically demonstrated that you might be better at strategic thinking than she is." Jennifer was right to be worried, though at the time I thought she might be overthinking the situation. The next few weeks brought a series of subtle but unmistakable signs that I was falling out of favor with Sarah and potentially being positioned for some kind of disciplinary action or performance management process. The changes were initially small enough that I wondered if I was being paranoid, but they quickly became too obvious to ignore. Sarah started excluding me from client meetings that I would normally attend as the primary account manager. When I asked about a strategy session with one of my major clients, she told me that she wanted to handle the meeting personally to ensure consistency in our messaging. When I offered to provide background materials or briefing documents, she declined and said she preferred to approach the client relationship with fresh perspective. She began assigning high-visibility projects to other team members while giving me administrative tasks that kept me buried in paperwork and prevented me from developing new client relationships. Instead of working on strategic campaigns, I found myself updating client databases, reformatting presentation templates, and conducting competitive analysis research that never seemed to be used for any actual client work. Most telling was how she started introducing me to clients and colleagues at industry events. Instead of highlighting my achievements, recent successes, or specific expertise with particular types of campaigns, she would simply state my name and title without any additional context. At a major marketing conference in downtown Chicago, She introduced me to a potential client simply as Marcus Johnson, one of our project managers, completely omitting the fact that I had successfully managed several major accounts and had specific experience in the prospects industry. The atmosphere in our entire department became increasingly tense as rumors spread about upcoming reorganization and potential layoffs. The company had hired McKinsey, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world, to evaluate our operations and recommend structural changes that would improve efficiency and profitability. Anonymous surveys were distributed asking employees to rate their colleagues' performance, leadership potential, and overall contribution to departmental success. Coffee break conversations were filled with speculation about who was safe and who might be vulnerable in any potential restructuring. People began paying closer attention to which meetings they were included in, which projects they were assigned to, and how their supervisors interacted with them in both formal and informal settings. The uncertainty created an environment where normal workplace collaboration became strained as people worried about protecting their own positions. That's when I made the decision that would ultimately save my career, though I didn't realize it at the time. My former college roommate David Martinez worked at Strategic Vision Group, one of our biggest competitors and a company that had been steadily gaining market share in the Chicago metropolitan area. David and I had maintained our friendship over the years despite working for competing organizations, occasionally meeting for drinks or dinner to catch up on industry news and personal developments. Our friendship had survived the transition from college classmates to industry colleagues because we had always maintained clear boundaries about confidential business information while still being able to discuss general trends and career development. David was someone I trusted completely, and his insights into the marketing industry had always been valuable even when we were working for different companies. During one of our regular conversations in early November, we met at Shaw's Crab House, an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago that was convenient for both of our offices. The November wind was howling off Lake Michigan, making the warm interior of the restaurant feel even more inviting. We had secured a quiet corner table where we could talk without being overheard by other patrons or accidentally running into colleagues from either of our companies. David mentioned that Strategic Vision was expanding their Chicago operations and actively looking for experienced senior managers who could help them capitalize on growing demand for innovative marketing services. The company had recently won several major accounts from competitors, including 2 clients who had specifically requested to work with agencies that offered more creative and strategic approaches than their previous providers. "You should seriously consider making a move," David said as he worked on his seafood pasta. "Strategic Vision is everything Pinnacle pretends to be. They actually value innovation and treat their employees like human beings instead of replaceable resources. The culture there is completely different. People collaborate instead of competing with each other, and management actually recognizes and rewards good work." I wasn't actively looking to leave Pinnacle at that time, despite my growing concerns about Sarah's treatment of me. The company had been good to me overall, and I had invested 4 years in building relationships and establishing my reputation. I also had a natural loyalty to organizations and people, preferring to work through problems rather than simply changing jobs when things became difficult. But David's words planted a seed that continued growing over the following weeks as Sarah's treatment of me continued to deteriorate. The final push came when I discovered that Sarah had taken credit for my technology company strategy during a presentation to the executive board. A friend in the administrative department, someone who had access to board meeting materials, mentioned seeing presentation slides that contained ideas I had developed but were attributed solely to Sarah's strategic leadership. The presentation had apparently been very well received by the board, with several executives praising Sarah's innovative thinking and asking her to develop implementation plans for the technology sector outreach strategy. The strategy that had been dismissed when I presented it to the department was suddenly being celebrated as breakthrough strategic thinking when Sarah presented it as her own work. That discovery was the final straw that convinced me to seriously explore other opportunities. That weekend, I reached out to David and asked him to put me in touch with the right people at Strategic Vision Group. I explained that I was interested in learning more about their expansion plans and seeing if there might be opportunities that would be a good fit for my experience and career goals. The initial phone conversation with Rebecca Torres, Strategic Vision's Director of Talent Acquisition, went better than I had hoped. Rebecca was familiar with my reputation in the industry and specifically mentioned campaigns I had led that had won regional marketing awards and been featured in industry publications. She had apparently been following my work for some time and was impressed with my client retention rates and success in developing new business relationships. Rebecca invited me to come in for a formal interview the following week, scheduling it for a Friday afternoon when I could more easily get away from Pinnacle without raising suspicions. She also mentioned that Strategic Vision was specifically looking for someone who could help them develop strategies for targeting technology companies, which seemed like an almost too perfect alignment with the work I had been doing. Strategic Vision's offices were located in a modern building just 6 blocks from Pinnacle's downtown tower, but the atmosphere felt completely different from the moment I walked through their front doors. Where Pinnacle's environment was all sharp edges, neutral colors, and competitive tension, Strategic Vision felt collaborative, energetic, and genuinely welcoming. The reception area featured comfortable seating, vibrant artwork from local artists, and floor-to-ceiling windows that provided stunning views of the Chicago River. During my interview process, I met with multiple team members who all seemed genuinely enthusiastic about their work and supportive of each other's success. The collaborative culture was immediately apparent in how people interacted with each other and discussed their projects. Instead of the guarded conversations and political maneuvering that characterized interactions at Pinnacle, Strategic Vision employees seemed comfortable sharing ideas, asking for help, and celebrating each other's achievements. Rebecca made me an offer that was 30% higher than my current salary, along with significantly better benefits including full health insurance coverage, a more generous retirement plan, and 3 weeks of paid vacation compared to the 2 weeks I was currently earning at Pinnacle. The position would involve leading a team of 12 people and working directly with major clients on strategic planning and campaign development. Most importantly, they were specifically interested in implementing the technology company outreach strategy one had developed at Pinnacle. Rebecca mentioned that Strategic Vision had been looking for ways to expand into the technology sector, and my experience and strategic approach were exactly what they needed to make that expansion successful. I asked for a few days to consider the offer, though I had already made up my mind. The opportunity represented everything I had been hoping to achieve at Pinnacle, but had been prevented from pursuing because of the increasingly toxic relationship with Sarah. Strategic Vision was offering me the chance to actually implement my ideas and lead a team in executing innovative strategies that could have real impact in the marketplace. That night, I called my parents back in Wisconsin to talk through the decision. My father, who had worked for the same manufacturing company for 32 years and was nearing retirement, had always been a source of practical wisdom when I faced major career decisions. My mother, a former high school principal, was particularly good at helping me think through the interpersonal and political aspects of workplace situations. If they're not recognizing your value and giving you room to grow, then you owe it to yourself to find a place that will, my father said during our hour-long conversation. You've always been smart about your career decisions, son, and you've never been someone who changes jobs impulsively. If you're seriously considering this move, it's probably because you've identified real problems with your current situation that aren't going to get better on their own. My mother was more concerned about the potential risks of changing companies, particularly given the competitive relationship between Pinnacle and Strategic Vision. She worried about whether I might be perceived as disloyal or whether there could be legal complications related to confidentiality agreements and client relationships. Her concerns were valid, but after researching the relevant employment law and consulting with a lawyer friend, I felt confident that I could make the transition ethically and legally. I signed the contract with Strategic Vision on a Friday afternoon in mid-November, with my start date set for the Monday after Thanksgiving. The timing would give me a chance to finish my current projects at Pinnacle and transition my responsibilities to other team members in a professional manner. I had always prided myself on handling job transitions responsibly, ensuring that clients weren't negatively impacted by my departure. I planned to give my notice the following Monday, providing 2 full weeks for a professional transition period. I had already begun preparing detailed notes about each of my client accounts, including contact information, project histories, upcoming deadlines, and strategic recommendations for future campaign development. My plan was to make the transition as smooth as possible for both my clients and my colleagues who would be taking over my responsibilities. That weekend felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders for the first time in months. I spent Saturday morning running along the lakefront path, something I hadn't done regularly since the situation at work had become so stressful. The November air was crisp and clean, with Lake Michigan looking almost silver under the overcast sky. The city looked different somehow, more full of possibilities and less oppressive than it had seemed during the difficult weeks leading up to my decision to leave. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely optimistic about my professional future and excited about the opportunities that lay ahead. The prospect of working in a collaborative environment where my ideas would be valued and implemented was energizing in a way that reminded me why I had been drawn to marketing in the first place. I spent Sunday afternoon researching strategic visions existing clients and brainstorming ways that my technology sector expertise could help them expand their service offerings. Monday morning arrived with the kind of bitter wind that makes Chicago winters legendary, with temperatures dropping into the 20s and snow flurries that made the commute treacherous for drivers and pedestrians alike. I got to the office early, planning to schedule a private meeting with Sarah to submit my resignation letter and begin the transition process. My plan was to be professional and gracious, thanking her for the opportunities one had been given while explaining that I was ready for new challenges that would allow me to continue growing professionally. I had prepared a formal resignation letter that expressed gratitude for my time at Pinnacle while providing the required 2 weeks' notice. The letter was carefully worded to avoid any language that could be perceived as critical of the company or my supervisors, focusing instead on my enthusiasm for new opportunities and my commitment to ensuring a smooth transition of my responsibilities. But Sarah had other plans that would make my carefully prepared resignation completely irrelevant. At 9:30 in the morning, she sent an email to the entire department calling for an immediate mandatory meeting. The subject line simply read, "Organizational Updates," with high priority flagging that ensured the message would appear at the top of everyone's inbox. My stomach dropped as I read the message, sensing that something significant was about to happen and worried that it might somehow be related to my job search activities. The conference room was buzzing with nervous energy when I arrived a few minutes before the scheduled 10 o'clock start time. Everyone was speculating about the purpose of the meeting, with theories ranging from major new client announcements to significant layoffs, as part of the organizational restructuring that had been rumored for weeks. The McKinsey consultants had been increasingly visible around the office, conducting interviews and analyzing departmental workflows, which had everyone on edge about potential changes. Sarah entered the conference room precisely at 10 o'clock, carrying a thick folder and wearing the kind of stern expression that experienced employees had learned meant bad news for someone. Her usual professional demeanor seemed even more rigid than usual, and she avoided making eye contact with specific individuals as she made her way to the front of the room. She started with general comments about the company's performance over the past quarter and the need to make strategic adjustments to remain competitive in an increasingly challenging marketplace. Her words were carefully chosen and formal, like she was reading from a script that had been prepared by the legal department to minimize potential liability issues. The tone was ominous, and I could feel the tension in the room increasing as people realized this wasn't going to be a routine update meeting. Then she began talking about leadership qualities and the importance of having the right people in key positions to execute the company's strategic vision. Her language became more pointed as she discussed the characteristics that distinguish truly effective leaders from people who were simply good at executing assigned tasks without demonstrating the vision and initiative necessary for advancement. Effective leadership requires vision, adaptability, and the ability to inspire others while delivering consistent results, she said, her eyes scanning the room in a way that made several people shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Some individuals excel as individual contributors, but lack the strategic thinking and interpersonal skills necessary for advancement into leadership roles within our organization. My heart was pounding as I realized where this presentation was heading and began to suspect that I might be the target of whatever announcement was coming. Sarah's gaze seemed to linger on me longer than on other people as she continued speaking, and I noticed that several of my colleagues were stealing glances in my direction. After careful evaluation of our current staffing structure and future organizational needs, we've identified several positions that need to be restructured to better align with our strategic goals and operational requirements, she continued. These decisions haven't been made lightly, but they're necessary for our department's continued success and our ability to serve our clients at the highest level. The room was completely silent except for the humming of the air conditioning system and the muffled sounds of traffic from the street 20 floors below. I could feel everyone's eyes turning toward me as Sarah opened her folder and pulled out what looked like official termination paperwork that had been prepared in advance of this meeting. "Marcus, I'm sorry, but we've decided you're not leadership material," she said, looking directly at me with an expression that seemed almost satisfied. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. Please gather your personal belongings and report to Human Resources before leaving the building today. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your things." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had been expecting something like this based on Sarah's increasingly hostile treatment over the past several weeks. What I hadn't anticipated was the public humiliation of being fired in front of my colleagues, many of whom had worked closely with me and knew the quality of my work and dedication to the company. Several people looked genuinely shocked by the announcement, their faces showing confusion and disbelief. Jennifer appeared to be fighting back tears, and I could see anger in the faces of a few team members who had collaborated with me on successful projects and knew that my performance had been consistently strong. Michael Chen, the senior partner, looked particularly surprised and seemed to be taking notes about what was happening. I took a deep breath and stood up slowly, maintaining as much dignity as possible under the circumstances while trying to process the surreal nature of what was happening. My voice was steady when I responded, though inside I was fighting a complex mixture of anger, embarrassment, relief, and satisfaction at what I was about to reveal. "I understand," I said simply, looking directly at Sarah. "Thank you for the opportunity to work here over the past 4 years." Sarah looked surprised that I wasn't arguing, demanding an explanation, or showing any visible signs of distress. She seemed prepared for a confrontation or emotional reaction that never materialized. Instead, I gathered my notebook and pen from the conference table and walked toward the door, planning to leave with whatever dignity I could maintain. But then something inside me decided that this moment called for complete honesty and transparency. I paused at the door and turned back to address the room, knowing that what I was about to say would change the entire dynamic of the situation. "Actually, there's something I should mention," I said, looking directly at Sarah while addressing the entire room. "I signed a contract with Strategic Vision Group last Friday afternoon. Today was supposed to be the day I submitted my resignation letter, giving you 2 weeks' notice to find my replacement and transition my responsibilities to other team members. The impact was immediate and dramatic." Sarah's face went completely pale, and I could hear several people gasp audibly around the room. Strategic Vision wasn't just any competitor. They were Pinnacle's biggest rival and had been systematically stealing clients and top talent over the past 2 years. The revelation that I had already been recruited by their primary competitor completely changed the narrative of what had just happened. "You what?" Sarah managed to say, her professional composure completely shattered for the first time since I had known her. "I'll be starting as Senior Director of Strategic Accounts next Monday," I continued, enjoying the shocked expressions around the room. Ironically, they hired me specifically because of my leadership potential and the innovative strategies I've developed. They were particularly interested in my technology sector outreach plan, the one I presented to this department several weeks ago. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in Sarah's head as she realized the full implications of what I had just revealed. Not only was she losing an experienced team member who had consistently delivered strong results, but she was essentially delivering me directly to the competition along with detailed knowledge of Pinnacle's client strategies, internal operations, and competitive weaknesses. The situation had transformed from what appeared to be a justified termination based on performance concerns into what looked like a catastrophic strategic error that would benefit Pinnacle's biggest competitor. Several people in the room seemed to be processing this same realization, and I could see confusion and concern in their expressions as they tried to understand how such a situation had developed. One of the senior partners, Michael Chen, spoke up from the back of the room. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could detect underlying tension and concern about what he had just witnessed. "Marcus, could you step outside for a moment? We need to discuss this situation internally before proceeding further." I nodded and left the conference room, closing the door behind me while feeling a mixture of satisfaction and nervousness about what had just transpired. Through the glass walls, I could see animated discussions breaking out immediately among the people who remained in the room. Sarah was clearly being questioned by several senior executives, and her confident demeanor had completely disappeared as she tried to explain her decision-making process. Michael Chan appeared to be asking pointed questions while gesturing toward the door where I had exited. Other team members were shaking their heads in apparent disbelief, and I could see Jennifer covering her face with her hands in what looked like second-hand embarrassment for the entire situation. The body language in the room suggested that Sarah was facing significant criticism for her handling of what had just occurred. Jennifer slipped out of the meeting a few minutes later and found me standing by my desk, trying to process everything that had just happened. Her expression was a mixture of shock, sympathy, and barely concealed anger at what she had witnessed. "This is absolutely insane," she whispered, looking around to make sure we weren't being overheard by other colleagues or anyone from the senior management team. "Everyone in there is talking about how this makes absolutely no sense from a business perspective. You've been one of our most successful managers, and now you're going directly to strategic vision?" Sarah just handed them our best talent on a silver platter along with detailed knowledge of our internal operations. The conference room door opened, and Michael approached me with a deeply concerned expression. He had always been one of the more reasonable and fair-minded executives, known throughout the company for treating employees with respect and focusing on actual performance rather than political maneuvering or personal relationships. "Marcus, I need to ask you directly," he said, his voice low enough that our conversation wouldn't be overheard by other people in the area. "How long have you been in discussions with Strategic Vision Group?" "I submitted my initial application 2 weeks ago and signed their offer on Friday afternoon," I replied honestly, seeing no reason to hide the timeline of my job search. I had planned to give my 2 weeks' notice this morning, but obviously circumstances have changed dramatically. Michael's expression darkened as he processed this information and its implications for the company's competitive position. "So this decision to terminate your position had absolutely nothing to do with your job search activities?" "I never mentioned my job search to anyone here at Pinnacle," I confirmed, maintaining eye contact to emphasize my honesty. Sarah's decision appears to have been based entirely on her evaluation of my performance and leadership potential, without any knowledge of my discussions with Strategic Vision. The irony of the situation was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone involved. Sarah had just fired someone for lacking leadership material, only to discover that a major competitor had already identified that same person as leadership material worth actively recruiting. The optics were terrible for both Sarah personally and for Pinnacle's reputation as an organization that could recognize and retain top talent. The next few hours were a blur of emergency meetings with human resources, legal consultations to ensure proper handling of confidential information, and damage control discussions among senior management. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the office grapevine, and I could feel the mixture of sympathy, shock, and curiosity from my colleagues as I packed my personal belongings under the watchful eye of a security guard. The standard termination process felt surreal given the circumstances. I was required to surrender my company laptop, access cards, and company credit card while HR representatives went through a checklist of exit procedures that seemed completely inadequate for such an unusual situation. The legal department wanted to ensure that I understood my ongoing confidentiality obligations, though they seemed uncertain about how to handle someone who was transitioning directly to a major competitor. Rebecca Torres called me that afternoon as I was driving home through the heavy Chicago traffic, still trying to process everything that had happened. The news of my termination had already reached Strategic Vision through industry connections and mutual contacts, and Rebecca wanted to make sure I was okay and confirm that our employment agreement was still solid despite the unusual circumstances of my departure from Pinnacle. "I have to admit, this isn't how we typically acquire new team members," she said with a slight laugh that helped ease some of the tension I was feeling. "But it certainly confirms that we made the right choice in hiring you. Anyone who can prompt such a strong reaction from the competition obviously has something special to offer our organization." Rebecca also mentioned that Strategic Vision's senior management was actually pleased with how the situation had developed, despite the unconventional nature of my departure. They viewed Sarah's decision as a strategic error that would benefit Strategic Vision while potentially damaging Pinnacle's ability to compete effectively in key market segments. The weekend that followed was a strange combination of relief, anxiety, and anticipation. I spent Saturday morning calling my parents and closest friends to explain what had happened, receiving a mixture of sympathy for the public humiliation and congratulations for landing what appeared to be a significantly better opportunity. My father was particularly amused by the irony of the situation, noting that sometimes the best career moves happen when you least expect them. The next few days brought a series of unexpected developments that illustrated just how significant the ramifications of Sarah's decision would prove to be. 2 of my former clients called me directly to express their confusion about my departure and ask for my contact information at Strategic Vision. Apparently, Sarah had sent out standard notification emails about my departure without providing any context or explanation, leading clients to assume I had left voluntarily for a better opportunity. Patricia Coleman from the pharmaceutical company was particularly direct in her response. "Marcus, I just received a very confusing email from Sarah about your departure," she said during our phone conversation. "Can you help me understand what happened? You've been our primary contact for 2 years, and this is the first indication we've had that there were any issues with your performance or our working relationship." I explained the situation as diplomatically as possible, focusing on my excitement about new opportunities at Strategic Vision rather than criticizing Pinnacle's management decisions. Patricia's response was immediate and decisive. She wanted to explore the possibility of moving the pharmaceutical account to Strategic Vision to continue working with me. The potential loss of a major client so soon after my termination would obviously create additional problems for Sarah and the Pinnacle management team. Jennifer texted me over the weekend to share office gossip about the aftermath of my termination, information that painted a clear picture of the chaos and second-guessing that had followed Friday's dramatic meeting. According to her sources, several senior executives had questioned Sarah's judgment and decision-making process during emergency meetings that continued well into Friday evening. The fact that she had eliminated a position without consulting with other department heads, especially when that person was about to be recruited by a major competitor, had raised red flags about her strategic thinking abilities and understanding of competitive dynamics. Michael Chun had apparently been particularly critical, questioning why Sarah hadn't identified my job search activities earlier and taken steps to either address my concerns or manage my departure more strategically. More damaging was the revelation that Sarah had been aware of my growing dissatisfaction for several weeks, but had chosen to increase pressure rather than address the underlying issues. Several colleagues had mentioned observing her increasingly critical treatment of my work, and some had wondered whether she was trying to force me to quit rather than dealing with whatever problems she perceived in my performance. My first day at Strategic Vision felt like stepping into a completely different professional universe. The office energy was positive and collaborative, with people genuinely excited to share ideas and work together toward common goals, rather than competing with each other for recognition and advancement. Rebecca introduced me to my new team, a group of experienced professionals who had been looking forward to working with someone who could help them expand into new market segments and develop innovative approaches to client service. The onboarding process at Strategic Vision was comprehensive and welcoming, designed to help new employees understand the company culture and strategic priorities rather than simply completing administrative paperwork. I spent my first week meeting with various department heads, learning about ongoing client projects, and beginning to develop implementation plans for the technology sector outreach strategy that had been central to their decision to hire me. The technology company outreach strategy that Sarah had dismissed and then attempted to claim credit for became the foundation for Strategic Vision's most successful new client acquisition campaign in years. Within 6 weeks of my arrival, we had signed 4 new technology firms as clients, generating over $2 million in new annual revenue for the company. The approach that Pinnacle had considered not worth implementing became a major competitive advantage for their biggest rival. The success of the technology sector initiative led to expanded responsibilities and recognition within Strategic Vision that had never been available to me at Pinnacle. I was promoted to Senior Director of Strategic Development after just 3 months, with responsibility for identifying and developing new market opportunities across multiple industry verticals. The role involved working directly with the executive team on long-term strategic planning and competitive positioning. 3 months after my dramatic departure from Pinnacle, I received a LinkedIn message from Jennifer with news that brought the story full circle in a way that felt almost too poetic to be real. Sarah had been demoted from her department head position and reassigned to an individual contributor role focusing on account maintenance rather than strategic development or team leadership. According to Jennifer's sources within the company, the executive team had decided that Sarah's personnel decisions and strategic judgment had cost Pinnacle too much in lost talent, missed opportunities, and competitive disadvantage. The loss of my pharmaceutical client, who had indeed moved their account to Strategic Vision, had been the final straw that convinced senior management that changes were necessary. The Morrison Industries account that had started this entire chain of events became Strategic Vision's client in February, just 4 months after my termination from Pinnacle. Elena Rodriguez, Morrison's CEO, had specifically requested to work with me based on recommendations from our other technology sector clients and my reputation for innovative thinking and strategic problem-solving. The campaign we developed for Morrison Industries exceeded their expectations in every measurable category, from brand awareness and lead generation to customer acquisition and revenue growth. The integrated marketing strategy we implemented helped them successfully expand into 3 new international markets, achieving their ambitious growth targets 6 months ahead of schedule. The campaign won 2 industry awards and was featured in Marketing Today magazine as an example of innovative client relationship building and strategic campaign development. Looking back on that humiliating day in the conference room, I realized it was actually the best thing that could have happened to my career, though it certainly didn't feel that way at the time. Sarah's decision to fire me publicly, while painful and embarrassing in the moment, freed me to pursue opportunities that I might never have explored otherwise if I had remained comfortable in my position at Pinnacle. Her inability to recognize leadership potential in her own team members became Strategic Vision's gain and ultimately contributed to her own professional downfall. The irony that someone she deemed unfit for leadership would go on to lead successful strategic initiatives for her company's biggest competitor was not lost on industry observers who followed the subsequent developments. The experience taught me valuable lessons about workplace dynamics, the importance of recognizing your own worth even when others don't, and the danger of letting personal conflicts cloud professional judgment. Sometimes what feels like the worst day of your career turns out to be the first day of something much better, though you may not realize it until much later. More importantly, I learned that toxic workplace relationships and poor management decisions often create opportunities for positive change, even when that change feels forced or unwelcome initially. Sarah's treatment of me had been unfair and counterproductive, but it ultimately led me to a professional environment where my skills and contributions were valued and rewarded appropriately. Today, I lead a team of 24 people at Strategic Vision, and we've become the go-to agency for technology companies looking for innovative marketing solutions that help them achieve aggressive growth targets. The strategies I developed while trying to prove myself at Pinnacle now form the core of our most successful service offerings and have been implemented for clients across multiple industry verticals. Our technology sector practice has grown to represent nearly 40% of Strategic Vision's total revenue, making it one of our most profitable and strategically important business units. The success has led to expansion opportunities in other major markets, including New York and San Francisco, where we're replicating the Chicago model with equally impressive results. Every time I walk past Pinnacle's building on my way to client meetings in downtown Chicago, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. The building that once represented my professional aspirations now serves as a reminder of how much I've grown and achieved since leaving that toxic environment behind. 6 months after my termination, I received a formal offer from Pinnacle's new department head to return to the company in a senior leadership role, with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities. The offer came through a headhunter who mentioned that Pinnacle was struggling to rebuild their technology sector capabilities and had specifically asked about my availability. I declined the offer politely but firmly, explaining that I was completely satisfied with my current role and had no interest in returning to an organization that had failed to recognize my potential when I was already there. The conversation was professional, but I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that they now understood the value of what they had lost. The morning Sarah fired me for not being leadership material, I thought my professional world was ending and my reputation was irreparably damaged. Instead, it was just the beginning of the most successful and fulfilling period of my career. Her failure to see my potential became the catalyst for me discovering just how much I was capable of achieving when given the right environment, support, and opportunities to grow. Sometimes the people who doubt us the most end up doing us the biggest favors, even when that's the last thing they intended to do. Sarah's decision to publicly humiliate me became the push I needed to pursue opportunities that transformed my career in ways I never could have imagined while sitting in that conference room listening to her explain why I wasn't leadership material.